Welcome to Rock the Crown.
Welcome to Rock the Crown. I am your girl Daia, and I am here with my sisters Nafisa, Nefertari, and Naima. We are in season 3 of Rock the Crown, and we are so happy that you are here to join us. This second episode of season 3 is Detoxing Your Toxic Relationships. We hear this often about toxic relationships. I want to start by giving you a clear definition of what toxic relationship is. Toxic is usually used to define something that is deadly or something that is poisonous in material. And that's just what a toxic relationship is. It's a relationship that is poisonous to your inner being, it's poisonous to your growth, it stunts your growth. This relationship can be a marital relationship, it can be a parental relationship, it can be between two siblings, it can be with a coworker or even business associates. When you have someone in your midst who is toxic, it tends to stunt your growth. It causes you to operate on a lower vibration, okay? It brings negativity into your life. So, what we want to talk about today is detoxing that relationship. Sometimes a toxic relationship is worse. You can put in the work and you both can invest in creating the relationship that you both deserve to have. But sometimes when that relationship gets to be abusive or borderline abusive, sometimes it's best to just let it go. So we all have to take an assessment of our relationships and determine if this relationship is benefiting me. Is this relationship one that I'm finding joy in? Is this relationship one that I can grow in? Is this person encouraging me to grow? Is this person encouraging me to be my higher self? So, in this episode, myself and my queens will be discussing some of the signs of a toxic relationship. We'll also talk about how you can save your toxic relationships. Because keeping in mind that sometimes those toxic relationships is our family members, which is impossible sometimes. And it's best to keep the ties. As Muslim, we are taught to maintain the ties of your familial relationships. So we need to learn how to detox these relationships to make them better for both parties that are involved. So most of us have been involved in some type of toxic relationship, whether it be on a small scale or whether it be on a large scale. We've all experienced even just toxic times, right? There have been times where you and your mate maybe just did not get along, maybe just did not, were not really in it, for the betterment of the relationship. So we will kind of start by talking about some of the signs, some of the ways that you can tell if a relationship that you are involved in is toxic. And I believe Nefertari, you're going to talk to us a little bit about the signs of a toxic relationship.
Thank you, Daia. Yeah, it's good to know the signs because sometimes we can be in a relationship that's toxic and not even know it. You've heard that expression of you can't see the forest for the trees. Or did I say that backwards? The trees for the forest.
Either way works.
So yeah, and so it's really important to be able to know what some of those signs are. And one of them is like the lack of support, and like I said earlier, in any relationship, it could be uh, with your siblings, or in a relationship with your spouse, your business partner, your coworkers. But a lack of support definitely can cause toxicness in the relationship. And even with communication, if you have communication that's just toxic communication, having someone around that, when they talk, you always have, like, well, maybe not always. Some people have this person, a lot of times people have this person in their life where every time you hear from them, there's an issue, something's going on with something, they talking about somebody with something. And a lot of times we just lend our ear and we just kind of listen in on it. And then we might even find ourselves like, start, you nodding head and yeah, girl. And next thing you know, you done got engaged into this conversation, and you look up and you're trying to figure out, how did I even get here? And so we want to guard ourselves from being in relationships that are toxic as far as communication. But we can help each other with that by sometimes just adding value to it and sharing, because like I said, sometimes people can be doing a certain thing and they don't even have knowledge of the fact that they're doing that. And so just being able to help. So, tell your friend or tell your spouse, this is not something that I want to be a part of, as it relates to toxic communication. When you think about, people talk behind somebody's back about something else. So it's like, that's not something you want to be involved in. Or even jealousy. Jealousy is like something that is, very strong kind of a thing that can turn into a huge toxic part of a relationship. And sometimes it could be, you got the little small jealousy thing going on, where it's like, oh, like, she thinks she cute with such and such and such, versus instead of like giving her that, like, you really look good. I really like that shirt you have on, or that scarf, the way you tied it, or whatever it is, being able to just kind of give a little bit instead of showing that jealous side of it, I wish whatever. So on one side, like, that's your girlfriends. But then you can have a jealousy that can be huge if you're in a relationship and that male or that female are very jealous about whether that's, they've got a past or something that they're holding on to. And so it could be, see it being something that is not, it could be just an innocent conversation that you may be having with someone, and the jealousy tendencies within them is coming out, and it can become very toxic for the relationship, because you'll find yourself having to explain yourself through every little situation, which is pretty much like insecurity. And then controlling behaviors, being in a relationship with somebody telling you like what to do, how to do it, when to go, when not to go. You start to kind of mimic a robot in a way where you look up and it's another one of those situations where you're trying to figure out, how did I get here? How did I get here? When did I become this person where I can't think on my own? I can't move on my own. Like, you're not this human being. So, you know, controlling behaviors is something that we want to watch out for. And resentment is like, it's one of those things that I learned in a session that I was in with Tony Robbins as well. He kind of talked about those four R's, and resentment is one of them. So resistance, resentment, rejection, all of those things can definitely have an impact on toxic relationships. And then just dishonesty, when honesty and trust is very important. And so when you have that dishonesty there, it just kind of starts to take a toll on you in a way where you just don't know what to do, what to believe, how to believe, like, you can't believe something somebody says, and it's like, it starts to take a toll on you. It's like you can't trust them. So it's very important to be able to have that. And so just patterns of disrespect, it's like, whether it's something you say or do, or and how they respond to you, sometimes you might be like, did they just do that? Did they just say that? Like, what? So just patterns of disrespect, you have to really watch out for those kind of things. And just constant stress, because whether that's the toxic relationship can cause stress on you as an individual. And sometimes we think we're dealing with a situation and nothing is wrong, like you're handling it like, like a superwoman. I'm gonna put myself in a position as a female, in a relationship with a man. Like sometimes you don't see that some things can be causing you stress, but one of the ways of realizing that is when you fall ill. Stress can really cause a lot of turmoil to the body. It can cause a lot of toxation within the body because you are stressed. So it's very important that you are not allowing yourself to be in a position where you're constantly stressed about something. Stress can take you out of here. You heard that expression, stress will kill. It can kill. And so that's one of the things with stress. And so then, another thing that can be very toxic in a relationship is just ignoring your needs. And I could say, again, speaking from a woman's perspective, we do want to feel like um we're needed. Men want to feel like they're needed as well. Like, and I really would say, especially men, they want to know that they have a place to take care of you and to protect you. And so just having that need there. And so if you're ignoring the need in whatever way it is, that could be very detrimental on a relationship coming from both sides. And I'm kind of speaking more so from a marital perspective in that regard. But like they said, we're in various different we have various different types of relationships. So it's the same thing with your girlfriend, same thing with your business partner. Um, and so I would say too, as far as like loss of relationships can be toxic. When you think about relationships that you were in the past, I would just kind of come from that perspective. That maybe there's some things, some baggage that you haven't gotten rid of, and you're bringing it into something new. That can be very toxic for the new relationship that you're in because of things that you haven't been able to let go. So that's this. So an exercise I would probably share. We're going to put that in the chat for you guys to be able to. We're going to put a link there. So this is an exercise where they're going to take you through and ask you to make a list of between 10 to 20 people, people that are in your life, that's in your life, and you're going to put a plus sign. If they're really adding value to your life, and a negative sign if not. Hopefully, I think I'm correct about that, but you'll be able to click on the link and then just follow the instructions from them. And so it's going to be able to show you like how much do you really have around you in your life cycle of people who are positive versus negative. And that's going to kind of tell you what position that you're in as far as what level of toxicity, and maybe you may not have any toxic relationships, and that's a blessing. But we do know that there are some people out there who do have toxic relationships, on any level across the board, whether that's through marriage, other forms of relationship, business, like we said, co-workers, whatever. And so do take part in that exercise, and then maybe share when you see this episode, or just go to our Facebook page and give us some information. We're definitely interested in hearing what the outcome is for some of you all on that. And so, can a relationship be saved? Can a relationship be saved if it is toxic? Let's talk about that, Naima.
Can a relationship be saved? I think that this is one of my big things. I love this part because I'm always thinking about, can we save this? What's the problem? Let's go back to the source. Let's try to fix everything. And so I've been told that sometimes I live in a nostalgic world, and that where I think that everything should be hunky dory. But I think that it's important for us to think about, can relationships be saved? Not just from the standpoint of, feeling like, you know, well, let me back that up a little bit. I think that we live in a society where scissors. We live in a society with scissors, and so when people begin to become uncomfortable, and I'm so glad, Nefertari, that you went over, the signs, a few of the signs of what a toxic relationship is, and we do want to qualify that those aren't all the signs, but those are, definitely some of the main factors. when people see those things, instead of saying, well, this is toxic, I'm going to, cut it, let's think about, how can we work this out? Because whether we're the one being toxic or the one that's receiving the toxicity, the relationship has to be saved. I was thinking today, I was listening to, everybody's listening to self-help and all of the other things. And I was thinking, they were talking about narcissistic people. And everybody knows a narcissist, everybody, right? They've seen one, we've had president for one, all these different things, right? And I was thinking in my head, I was like, you know what? Narcissists need love too. And the reason that they're narcissistic is because they don't have love. And the reason some people are toxic is because they haven't been able to form healthy relationships. So when we think about, can the relationships be saved? We hope and pray that it can be on the part of both people, that they're willing to invest, right? Because why be in a relationship if only one person wants to work on it, right? But it can be saved if both parties are willing to invest. And so this, again, we're talking about all relationships, parent-child relationships, brother-sister relationships. We're talking about, platonic relationships, friendships, business relationships, are both parties willing to invest? And in our last episode, we talked about commitment, and really the investment is leading back to your level of commitment that you have for that relationship. Then thinking about the acceptance of responsibility, right? We're just going to call this the AR, acceptance of responsibility. People hate to do, they hate to accept responsibility for their act in why the relationship is toxic, right? And or if whether they contributed to it or not, just being able to acknowledge that there is some level of acceptance of responsibility. And again, when we say this, this is either on the person doing the toxic act or receiving the toxic act, because you have to also be willing to accept responsibility that you take toxic people into your life. And so I've been, around specific younger people, and they were just like, everything was a blame game. Everything was about blaming, blaming, blaming. And so to me, the shift from blaming to understanding is one thing, but also blaming and understanding your part in it, right? So when we think about, can a relationship be saved, accepting the responsibility, then shifting from blaming to understanding, right? Why was this person acting this way? Why did they yell at me this way? Are they able to understand that the actions that they're doing toward me are not things that you can erase? Are they aware of what they're saying to me is going to affect me in 2 hours or in 2 days or in 3, whatever, and then just making sure that the understanding is there. And I think that also sometimes we kind of think that understanding means that we are condoning bad behavior, but that's not really what that means. Understanding is where love comes in. When you love a thing or love a person or love something inside of that relationship, that's where you are merciful enough to understand that perspective, from blaming to understanding. And then the openness to outside help. People need to be willing to get help. Like, there's so many resources out here that we can, actually get help for these relationships. And so it's almost kind of to the point where we can no longer say, hey, you know what, this relationship is not salvageable, because we have so many resources. It's really, again, going back to what we talked about earlier. Are you willing to invest in it? And then the second part of can the relationship be saved is, how can we move forward in those toxic relationships? One of them is the DWELL syndrome, dwelling, right? We know that dwelling is also a place that you live in. Well, when you dwell in something, you're living in it. So don't dwell on the past, right? So you're living in the past because it's so difficult for you to move forward because you're comfortable in the past. So just kind of thinking of, and again, sometimes it gives you validity to blame somebody else, right? So just thinking about, don't dwell on the past. We know that there are certain behaviors that continue to perpetuate because, and so that's kind of why people sometimes recognize, well, you did this a long time ago and you're still doing it. That's kind of why people do that. But we have to kind of shift to understanding. Okay, let's see how we can change this behavior to make this relationship not be so toxic. And then viewing your partner, your friend, your child, your business associate, your even your religious leaders, anybody, viewing them with compassion. And compassion, again, is a word that stems from a higher place, of course. So if you don't feel as if you're receiving compassion from a higher source, you definitely can't give it to someone else. And so to me, this also goes back to being centered with the creator, right? So compassion is comes from kindness and all of this. This is where the butterflies are, right? But we want to make sure that we have compassion for one another, because compassion also, there's love in compassion. And when I sometimes I think about this, in the Bible, when it talks about all of these qualities of what love is in First Corinthians 13, it talks about, love is not puffed up. Love is not, it doesn't have, it's not haughty. These things that love have and exhibit inside of them is due to compassion. So just thinking about that, can we move forward with compassion with one another? Practicing healthy communication. We talked about this also in our last episode. In case you all missed it, go back and watch it. But we talked about communication and having healthy communication. And something I was laughing in my head because Jaya had made a mention on the last episode about, when people don't understand how each other communicate. And it's kind of like, this is something that I talked to my husband about, because he's from New Orleans, and there are a lot of sayings that they have in New Orleans that I just don't understand, right? And so it's just kind of leaning in and really understanding, like, from my perspective, from your perspective, this is what this means. So if he's walking around calling women that he's not married to baby, I know that he's not calling them baby like I'm baby. He's calling them baby because that is their cultural slang, right? And just making sure that we understand that. So like if I had if we had not had a healthy conversation about that, that could easily become a problem in the relationship. And then of course being accountable, back to the blaming and understanding, and accepting responsibility, being accountable for what it happens and exists in the relationship as it moves forward also is important. And then healing individually. We talked about this also in another talk that I recently did about how people, they were saying, one gentleman was making the comment that people shouldn't get in relationships until they're healed individually. Yeah, that's ideal, but that's not reality, right? And so, in healing individually, again, you have to acknowledge that there's a problem. You can't heal from anything without acknowledgement. So, I think that that's the first thing. Can you move forward in the relationship if we can acknowledge that this problem, this toxicity exists in this relationship? And then, being able to, if we can heal and go move forward, do we have space in our hearts, our minds, to allow for each other to change? And I think that that's why relationships that last such a long time, they have space in their heart and in their mind for each other, and the willingness and the ability for people to change. I don't really like the term when it says people, people never change. People don't change. Yes, they do. People change every day. They wake up, they see different perspectives. It may not be an overnight change for some people, and it takes longer for some people to change, but you have to hold space for people. When people make a mistake, you can't hold that over their head forever, and just be open enough to allow for them to grow as they're healing individually and making those changes. And so now that we've kind of talked about can the relationship move forward, we also need to make sure that we understand the difference between abuse versus toxicity. And who's going to share that? I wasn't for sure. Who's going to share that perspective with us?
I will. I'll show that.
Okay.
All right. So that was great that you gave us different techniques and things like that that you can use to save a relationship. That if you feel like, oh, these signs that Nefertari talked about, I feel like they exist in my relationships. And then Naima talked about different ways that you can use to possibly save that relationship and evaluate if you want to save it. And then, if so, some techniques you can use to save it. But you also want to think about, too, when it becomes a pattern. right? A pattern, and a pattern that increases in intensity, right? And so then that's when you comes to the topic of abuse versus toxicity. Toxicity. Can't even say the word. Anyway, so the following signs, we want to give you some following signs so you to help you to be able to distinguish the difference between the two. And these signs that I'm going to speak about, I'm going to mention just a little bit about, can deal with either the physical side or the emotional abuse, right? So then instead of you just having maybe a toxic event or a specific toxic behavior, you have moved into it being a pattern, a repeated pattern, and that pattern has increased in intensity, which rises to the level of abuse. So the signs that we want to talk about are, number one is you have a diminished self worth. And again, this is a pattern of feeling this way. Number two would be chronic stress and anxiety. Like you're always feeling anxious, you're always feeling on edge. Number three, separations from friends and family. A lot of times when you start to feel less self worth, you start to be more isolated, in your behavior. So you want to be able to look at that. And then interference with work or school, fear or intimidation, where either they're exhibiting this in their demeanor or in their words or in their actions that cause you to feel this way. Name calling and put down. A lot of people don't realize, but if every time we have a disagreement, you are insulting me, you are calling me names, you are putting me down, then if you have patterns of that, that rises to the level of abuse. And then also physical violence. A lot of times it's much easier for us to identify physical violence as abuse because it's visible, something that we can see with the naked eye. We don't always see the other six that I mentioned before this because they're intangible. It's nothing you necessarily see. It's more like a feeling that you get. So these are some different things, that signs that if you have these things occurring repeatedly throughout your relationship, right? And the intensity of them, you might want to look at, it might be best to walk away, right? It might be best to walk away. And what I would also want in terms of Crown Nation that you want to keep abreast of, at the end of the day, I know we talked about, the words, and sometimes the words themselves have certain triggers, right? But, toxicity, abuse, these words, sometimes just mentioning the words themselves, have certain triggers. But don't just get caught up on the words. At the end of the day, it comes down to whatever relationship that you're in, is that relationship adding value to you? Is it helping you grow, or is it diminishing you? Is it putting stuff into your bucket? Is it filling it up? Or is it constantly taking it away? So now that you're in the negative. And if you ever feel that your relationship, whether you're talking about a friend relationship, a family relationship, a lover, spouse relationship, if it's always they're taking out and it's not helping you grow to be a better person, regardless of the label, you want to make sure that you're dealing with that and looking into that in a more way. And you might want to remove yourself um, for, from that. You might want to remove yourself from that. If it's a family thing, if I have toxic people that are in my family, they're still my family, right? But I limit my communication with them. Hi, how you doing? You doing okay? Okay, good. And the kids all right? All right, good. Okay, well, it's good to see you. I'm glad everything's going okay. Well, I'll talk to you later. I got some work to do. I appreciate it. Keep it short and simple, right? Because I got to protect my energy, right? I got to protect my energy. I got to protect my space. I love you, but I'm going to love you from, less than 5 minutes, right? I even do that with some friends sometimes too, right? And because I don't have a whole lot of friends on purpose, on purpose. And then also too, you want to protect that too with your friends, right? Your energy with your friends. And sometimes you just might need to let them know, like, do you realize that you've been giving me all this negative conversation? Sometimes people just need to get something out because they want to be heard, because they want somebody to listen to them. But if it's a pattern, See, none of these things in isolation is necessarily a problem, but when it's a pattern, right? That's when it rises to the level of being a toxic relationship or being abuse. And at the end of the day, you just want to make sure that you're protecting your energy, and that even when somebody is being abusive towards you, or name calling or doing any other of these signs that they talked about before, you want to make sure call them to account for it. Let them know what you need. You spoke to me in this manner and that's not acceptable. I'm going to need you to do this when this happens again. You see what I'm saying? And it's up to them whether they're going to choose to modify their behavior or work on modifying their behavior, right? So those are just some of the things that I wanted to bring to you all today. I hope it was some help, and we're going to continue on with this conversation with looking at possible example. Daia, you want to talk about the example? You might want to talk about this.
Oh, sure. Thank you, ladies, so much. You all have given an excellent overview of this conversation. I really want to encourage our viewers. Most of our viewers are our age, and I really want to encourage you all to share this with your younger children as they start to build these relationships, and form, friendships. They need to also be very aware of who they have in their circle. Is as they're young people, they're trying to, set goals. They're trying to establish themselves in a career, and so it's very important that they surround themselves with people who are positive, with people who are encouraging, right? Who are supportive. It's very important that we encourage them to keep their circle very tight. Everybody doesn't need to have 100% access to you. Everyone who comes into your Snapchat or your Instagram is not going to be good for you. So helping them also to be able to identify some of these signs is very, very important. So as we talk about a few of the examples, I wanted to reference, first of all, Iyanla Van Zant, who has a show, I don't know if it's still on, but Fix My Life. Right. And in a lot of her shows, she brings on families, she brings on, couples. And in a lot of times, the things that she talks about is the nature and the toxic nature in which they deal with one another. So I was watching one show the other day, and it was about a mother, and she had three children, and all of the three children, all expressed that they had issues with their parents. Put them down, and it didn't, it was borderline abusive, but it was really just that she was not supportive of them. She did not encourage them. A lot of the things that they have, they attributed it to their own, to their own selves, and how they had to really, really, encourage themselves to get to where they were. But Iyanla talks a lot about, recognizing these signs in your relationships and how to repair it. She does a lot of work in repairing and mending relationships. So, there's a lot of work that's put into it. She gives homework, she gives assignments. So there again, it's a skill where you're learning to really mend and repair relationships once you've determined that it's not an abusive relationship. And once you've determined that this is someone that I want to have in my life, this is someone that I do gain, benefit from, and this is someone who does add value. We just have this issue that we need to deal with head on, and just try to move on from there. I also was watching Lifetime, and there's a documentary that's coming out about Whitney Houston and Bobby Christina. And, we all know about Whitney and Bobby Brown's relationship. We know with celebrities, like, that's just they're in a totally different realm, right? But we know that their relationship was very toxic. If there ever were an example of a toxic relationship, it was that one. They just were not good for each other at all. Once they got together, there was this, a lot of drug use and abuse and all kind of things. And it just really spiraled, and I will say it more than likely started out just as being just a toxic relationship, just with these toxic elements, that were not, good for either of them. And then from there, it escalated. And so I just wanted to bring this example because I wanted to mention how that relationship and that toxicity in that relationship also spilled over into their child's life. Bobby Christina, took on a lot of the same habits as her mother, and as you all know, they both actually died in the same way, in the same manner. So that mother-daughter relationship was a very toxic relationship. No fault, no judgment here. We all as mothers do our very best. Whitney was very much a very devoted mother, but the lifestyle that she lived, it hindered her from, really, really being that supportive mom. And so, but that toxic relationship between mother and daughter really, caused Bobby Christina's, life to take a very, very bad, bad turn. So, that's why it's very important that we examine our relationships, especially our relationships with our children. As parents, we kind of we a lot of us, we had children when we were young. So as we were growing, we were also raising children. So, years went by, we learned some things that we didn't know when they were 5. So we tried to implement it when they were 15. And at this point, what happened? Resentment has already stacked up. Mom, you weren't this type of mom when I was growing up, and now you're wanting to be this type of mom. So it takes time, it takes patience, it takes compassion to be able to nurture, these relationships with our children. But if we see that there are any, forms of toxicity in our relationship with our children, let's identify it and let's work to try to establish better habits. It's never too late. It's never too late. I'm 40 years old. I'm still building a positive relationship with my father. I'm still building a relationship with my mother. My children are in their 16 to 21, still building beautiful relationships with them. So it's never too late. Like Naima said, let's not be so quick to cut the cord. Let's not be so quick to cut someone off, of our lives. Let's try and work, if they're willing, let's try and work towards building these beautiful relationships, because no one deserves to be discarded. No one wants to feel like, like they're, not important to you, in your life. I think that most of us, here have really done a lot of hard work to where we have really, like I have a zero tolerance. I'm like Nafisa. I don't a lot of, a lot of friends. I keep my circle very tight. So, I've learned that throughout the years. I've learned to do that throughout the years. And so that's when it's very important as young people to screen your friends, because once they become friends, you start to grow and have feelings for them. Even as friends, you start to love your friends. And then it becomes very, very difficult to make those changes, make those corrections when you've allowed, certain behaviors for so very long. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation. I felt like this was a very important topic for us to discuss, as we come into the new year, January, we're wanting to start off fresh. So as we're looking at, all the things, the goals that we have, and we're looking at, renovating our home or changing careers, we should also try to think about some of the relationships. How can I build better relationships in my life? How can I build a stronger bond, with my sisters or my brothers? So this is something that I'm encouraging my Crown Nation to do. And Crown Nation, please, comment and let us know, how our sessions, how our episodes are impacting your life. We really want to hear that. We really are wanting to share a piece of us with you, and we're hoping that you will reciprocate and share that with us. Ladies, I'm going to open up, and if anyone else wanted to add anything else to the conversation, please.
Well, if no one else wanted to open up, I definitely want to always remind people of our next episode. So please join us next Sunday, 7 p.m. We will be talking about finding a mate, finding yourself, in online dating. So guess what? Some of you all have those profiles on different, different websites. So we want to make sure that as you're putting those profiles up, that you're not only trying to find a mate, but you'll probably be finding yourself while you're finding a mate on these online dating profiles, because sometimes what you write down and what you think you're going to be getting, you don't get. So it's going to be a really, really interesting conversation that we want to share with you all next week. So again, join us at 7 p.m. And remember to subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and share these videos with all of your friends and family. So we love you so much, Crown Nation. We love to hear your comments. So we hope to hear from you. And again, we'll see you next week. Peace.